commercial acquisitions, multifamily, triple net, things of that nature. The reason why we got into modular is kind of by accident. When the fires happened over in the Palisades in Altadena, we quickly realized that there was a lot of homes that needed to be rebuilt. The fire in Altadena specifically just so happened to be within my backyard. I grew up in Pasadena, California, and this was within sort of, I guess, inches away from where I grew up. And so, having quickly realized this as a real estate investor, as a broker, we wanted to find ways to rebuild the city, not only efficiently, but effectively. And so that's how I sort of stumbled into the modular business. Uh, I've had to get my PhD in modular very quickly because what I soon realized was that with modular technology, not only can we build things a lot quicker, we could build them a lot more sturdier and a lot more, well, there's technologies out there that allow for us to build them a lot better. Traditional stick build, kind of as we all seen through the Palisades and Altadena, they burn up like matchboxes, unfortunately. And so, to address the situation, I have started to talk to different modular companies not only because of the speed component, but because of also the structural soundness of it. Typical modular companies use Type 2 steel and also microfiber cement boards, which are non-combustible. And so, in essence, what I quickly learned was that I could deliver a product that was not only that I could rebuild faster, but it's a lot more cost efficient as well. And so I became fascinated by that and dug deeper. And as I dug deeper into this, I found out through the modular companies that the benefits also apply in a commercial component or a commercial element. And in fact, the returns and the benefits are amplified because you have economies of scale and volume. And so I thought to myself, if that's the case, given the current climate, with rising interest rates, rising labor costs, rising materials costs, we are kind of in a perfect storm situation where modular makes sense all across the board. And so reaching out to my brokers network, relationships through James, Renaissance, EXP, I started to underwrite deals, particularly land deals, where if I were to apply modular versus construction, I could figure out sort of the delta, and the delta in return creates higher IRR investment returns, not only for ourselves as sponsors, as syndicators, but also for my investors. And so that's kind of how this all came about. Um, Prior to getting into the modular industry, I had already been frequently going back and forth to Asia. The reason why I was going to Asia at that time was because I had a steady pool of investors that wanted to participate in the US market because at the end of the day, the US markets tend to be the most robust throughout the history and time. And of course, that was more of leveraging the low interest rates in Asia, specifically Taiwan, and bringing the investor capital over here. But it also helped me forge relationships with overseas vendors as well, right? The value proposition of working with Asia companies and just international companies in general, I'm sure other developers and other material suppliers can attest, is that the labor is cheaper there and the costs are a lot more cheaper. And if you're able to sort of navigate through the tariffs, at the end of the day, I can also leverage the cost savings there. So putting this all together, I was able to find a business partner of mine that had just so happened to have a very strong relationship with a global manufacturer in construction. In fact, one of the largest manufacturers in the world. And it kind of was just, I guess, fate and destiny, so to speak, because they had expressed interest that they wanted to get into the US market and tap into the modular industry, which, by the way, you guys, it only encompasses about 1 to 2% of the total construction industry as a whole. Uh, Modular, as of last year, was about $150 billion industry. I don't know if you guys know this, but the construction industry is $10 trillion, and it's one of the last sectors in America to be industrialized. And so when we have rising wages and increasing labor costs and less and less people signing up to be skilled trades in construction, I know the newer generation doesn't really want to do this, and we're finding it harder and harder to get that same talent pool to be able to complete our projects. This essentially is that perfect storm in which modular is poised to not only disrupt, but also start to be normalized in the construction industry. And we want to get in there early on. So I have a few slides about where where modular becomes super effective. I'll show it to you first in a residential application, and then I'll show you how modular is super effective and amplified in a commercial application. So, um, James, I believe I can share slides, correct?
Yeah, please share.
Okay, cool. One second. All right. All right. So, can you see the slides?
We can.
Perfect. So, yeah, so in the markets today, when markets get noisy, weaker players pause, landowners start to get realistic on pricing, and deals start to surface off market and pricing softens. This is kind of the lay of the land. It's sort of been like that. I mean, I know you guys, a lot of you guys are commercial brokers and residential brokers. Um, the reality is markets have softened quite a bit, especially in commercial with the rising interest rates. But when I looked at that, I felt and a lot of my other brokers, we felt that this is a good time to get into good deals because people are willing to trade at much more favorable pricing. There's less competition, better terms, more negotiating power. And at the end of the day, real estate has always been a long-term play. So if you get in right now amidst the chaos, when things do stabilize, interest rates do come down, that's where the win is largely captured. And so with the modular, as I had mentioned earlier, it encompasses faster delivery, tighter budgets, and less exposure to the chaos in traditional. And then from there, talking about modular, just to quickly summarize, is there is a huge labor crisis. Wages have risen over 41% since 2020. And there is over 650,000 unfilled jobs in construction, making development a lot more difficult to execute and complete. And because of this issue, projects, as a stat, frequently encounters over 30% average in schedule overruns, which causes delays and increased costs. And you can only imagine if you have, construction loans or debt in general, how this could also snowball into making a deal go from maybe profitable or really profitable to just bleeding negatively. And then finally, of course, this situation I mentioned with the Palisades in Altadena, there's over 9,400 structures that need to be rebuilt. This is not something that's going to happen overnight. This is something that's going to take the next 4 to 5 years to completely revitalize and regentrify back to how it was, if not better. So that is why we're attacking the modular market. Um, with using the modular, because we have relationships with factories, I have the global factory that I had mentioned to you early in this presentation. I also have an assembly facility in the US. I am basically forging alliances with every modular group, beginning with these two very strong relationships that I have to be able to facilitate the demand that I foresee coming in the next few years. Um, the reason why I like the modular is because it allows me to have a repeatable approach that we can execute time and time again. It allows me to control the costs because when things are being done in an assembly line, picture Ford back in the day, there's only so many things that can go wrong because it literally just goes down the assembly line. Everyone does their sort of component and boom, it just goes down the line. And then by integrating this into a single supply chain or one or two supply chains and uniforming my cost structure, I can help deliver to not only our group, but also our clientele reduce timelines, enhancing our project delivery. And all in all, if we're saving money on cost and we're reducing our timelines, no matter how you cut it in any deal, whether it's residential or commercial, this undoubtedly improves returns for investors and stakeholders alike, and thus juicing up our IRRs. As I mentioned here, the modular industry is only in its infancy at the moment, even though it's been around for a very, very long time. As you can imagine, even if modular becomes 10% of the construction industry, that is going to be a huge boom. And again, because of the early relationships that we have, and as we build this platform, we will have economies of scale. We already have sort of the preferred relationship to get these modular units literally at cost. Um, we want to make sure that, we're able to then find, formidable projects to leverage these relationships. So, um, oh, this is a good illustration to show you how the savings really work. You know, uh, Besides the labor savings that we're sort of arbitraging, right? As you guys know, US labor is more expensive than overseas. If I were to offset that in a factory, I'm also saving time, which in this illustration where things are happening concurrently, right? So, for instance, whether it be Palisades, Altadena, or our hotel project in Hollywood, which I'll tell you guys more about, um, on the site level, foundation will be laid and podium level is being constructed. And as we're doing, the on-site work here on our projects, the factory on the top row here is currently, fabricating materials, doing the structural assembly. They're putting in wall panels. And in essence, this photo is just to illustrate that things are happening parallel, and that's where the time savings come into play. And so on average on a project, the total time savings can range anywhere between 30 to 50%. But your cost savings as well should be taken into account as well, which equates to about 20 to 25%. So huge benefits and huge deltas there. Talking about the factory, the first factory I have a relationship with is based out in Asia. They have over 3,000 acres of facilities cranking out these modular units. I know it's kind of hard to see, but that's me with my hard hat looking at a residential modular spec build. And on the bottom right corner is their entire building tower in Shenzhen, China. It's about 40 floors, and all of that is dedicated to real estate construction, and we have a whole floor on modular that are at our disposal. And so that is the strategic partner that we have aligned with to supply us with not only modular units, but also building materials. A lot of verticals here. This is a snapshot of one of their facilities. Each facility can do anywhere between 25 to 55 plus modules daily, depending on the intricacies of the module units. They're able to build with modular. It's not just, hotel projects and residential. It also encompasses multifamily, office, hospitals, student housing comes into play as well, and senior care as well. So anything that you can essentially normalize and repeat on scale tends to be the best application for modular. And there's an added benefit also in going this route. Every state in the country actually encourages developers to use modular because once you get a plan approved at the state level, you can actually fast track your project because once everything is certified and again approved at the state, there's really less red tape you have to clear. And so our goal and our benefit uh, that we receive from CSEC is partly due to the fact that we're also helping them establish, these lines and helping them achieve these certifications and basically systematize the supply chain and the SOP. But we're also helping them get these plans approved so that when we attack the next project, we already have a blueprint and we can also leverage the existing plans that we've had approved at the state level as well. So, um, when I talk about overseas or sourcing materials internationally, there is a geopolitical question, which is what are we going to do about the tariffs? As you guys know, there's always uncertainty there as it pertains to tariffs, and you guys probably have heard in the news that China was one of the markets that was affected most, right? Because they've always been a steady source of manufacturing and supplying at a global scale. Well, part of the agreement that we have with our suppliers is that we are able to obtain fixed pricing, meaning regardless of the tariffs, there is a ceiling that our supplier has to deliver, especially on the first few projects. They want to support us and give us pricing that we cannot refuse. And so we have a fixed pricing agreement with them that basically stabilizes and ensures that we don't exceed our estimated costs for the modular delivery. And with that cost certainty and locked pricing, from a development standpoint, we don't have any change order exposure. Change orders are usually what kill a deal in construction. Change orders can increase your project cost normally on average between 10 to 20%. But when everything is systematized and 95% of what I need for the modular side is built to spec off-site, I'm sorry, my margin of error becomes, reduced significantly. So having that cost certainty, in addition to the other benefits that I've said about the speed and expediting the whole entire construction process leads to a lot more pinpoint accurate project being executed when it comes to budgeting and things of that nature. So again, where are the opportunities? I see, of course, in residential, people have always talked about modular and ADU, but if I'm building things or we're building things at, 400 to 500 a square foot for luxury residential in markets that I know will trade over 1,000 a square foot, like the Palisades and almost 1,000 in Altadena, why wouldn't you apply this to larger builds if you can showcase that modular is just as effective and shows just as well and could be arguably superior in build quality to traditional stick build? So, I've always worked with investors in the commercial world, so we are actively acquiring properties here in Altadena and Palisades, buying good properties of dirt and putting modular units on there. And then essentially, there's a good opportunity to arbitrage those costs and make a good return on that. But we've always been syndicators. Uh, we're also finding that, in multifamily and hotel developments, like our Sunset Hollywood Hotel, which I'll tell you more about shortly, again, the costs are amplified, right, as you go into bigger deals because, the Sunset Hotel is about 130 unit or 130 key hotel. If I'm getting a volume of that size, my costs will arguably go down as well, or undoubtedly go down as well. So that enhances investor returns, especially because when you're looking at a syndication, IRR waterfalls come into play. And I have a whole thesis as to, how IRRs and what that, number looks like pre-modular and post-modular. So, and I do a seminar on this live as well. So again, addressing the fire situation, Palisades and Eaton fires. The Palisades fire itself affected 10,000 households. The Eaton fire, which is Altadena, affected over 15,000 households. So there's a huge opportunity there. The thesis was that land acquisition pricing post-fire leads to abundance of motivated sellers who just quickly want to get into new living situations. And, a lot of them, especially those that were able to cash out from insurance companies, just want to let go of the land and move on with life. And so we're seeing that there's a lot of favorable trade pricing for residential lots. A lot of people are actively buying and developing. And with the modular advantage, of course, I'm able to go apples to apples with a traditional stick builder, but with 30 to 50% efficiencies and speed and cost. And we can hit the market sooner as well. And We really like these markets because historically they've always been great markets. Palisades being on the top tier, top end of the Los Angeles market, and Altadena prior to the fires was in a quick path to gentrification due to its strategic location between, Pasadena and the San Gabriel Valley. And so again, exit pricing 1,300, 1,500 a square foot. To build luxury modular with the highest quality of finishes, our cost is closer to 600 to 700 a square foot, give or take. So, I mean, if the math speaks for itself there. Same thing with Altadena. We don't have to go quite as high well in competition in Altadena versus Pasadena, but same, economics apply. We can get things done at Altadena quality closer to 500 to 600 a square foot in a market that trades closer to 900 plus. Right now, we're finishing up a 4,400 square foot home in Altadena, and we'll be listing it at just over 1,000 a square foot. The floor there is supported for this level of build. Um, and this is sort of the economics, right? Traditional stick build would have cost us 800 in build cost. With the modular side, we can get it done for just around 600, mid 600s. There's a delta of 22% there. And, good parcel of land will cost you anywhere between 1.5 to 2 million in Palisades. I'm not here to build like 10,000 square foot homes there. I'm here to build repeatable homes on that the average, person in that market can acquire. So we're looking at about call it 3,000 to 4,000 square feet. And then so your total all in there, as you can see in this illustration, with the reduced cost and the reduced speed, you can actually achieve returns that are in the 20 to 40% range in pretty quick order. Estimated timeline around, 12 to 15 months. And then same thing in Altadena as well. There's always going to be a delta in build costs. We know that. There's also cheaper land acquisition prices. So, if one wants to participate early on, this may be an alternative option for them or diversify. This may be an alternative option, but the same rules apply based on median costs of the market. There's a healthy return to be made there. And so we're actively doing this on a local level in the residential application. Now, kind
Eddie,
of
can I
seg
ask a quick question on the
sure.
modular? Does the company that you have too, because of the square footage and locations, I was talking to a friend about this, they did say California would be the best because of the labor costs, all the costs is so high versus maybe a lower cost state or city. Does modular have, let's say, ADU or DADU units too that you guys develop and build?
Absolutely, yeah. We can build literally anything you can virtually think of. And so we're trying to standardize multiple ADU builds, but I'm also trying to standardize multiple residential builds as well. And you're right on the button. The markets where this is most effective are, your coastal cities where your exit pricings and your trade pricings tend to be higher than, Midwest markets. Not to, put down middle of the middle markets because I love those markets for cash flow and other things. But yeah, it's most effective when you have markets like, where you're at, Seattle or here in LA, where again, our sales prices tend to be a lot higher. Because the modular cost will be pretty uniform all across the board, no matter what state you're in. However, it's important to note on this, because we're going with modular technology and we're using type 2 steel and microfiber cement boards, our insurance costs are actually lower. There's an added benefit on the back end as well, not just from an investment perspective, but because of the fires in Palisades and Altadena, we're quickly learning that, with modular construction and type 2 steel, insurance companies tend to feel this is much more safer and you get much better pricing on policies. And also banks also look at this a lot more favorably as well when they know your building's built out of this. So hopefully that
Yeah,
addresses those points.
no,
Yeah.
I love that because one of the things we're talking, and I'll set you up with one of the largest construction development organizations in the US. They were telling me exactly this. it's not your old modular that people thought, where it was, sometimes they think modular is very similar to um, mobile homes, right? It's not,
Yeah.
right? Mobile homes are a depreciating asset, while
Right.
modular, the way they built now, sometimes are very indistinguishable. And a lot of the home builders are starting to move and understand this. It's just government regulations understanding how to speed it up. But many of this home builders organization, well, I'll probably have you meet with them to discuss. They're looking to expand it, and because of the company that you're working with, it's so large. As you and I know, we're going into some possible political discussions in California to
Right.
really implement it here, maybe Texas and other states, that they do have a affordability issue. They do have a labor issue with what's going on. They do have a technical skill issue, but they still need to solve the problem of housing, right? And this is that solution and bridge ever since all the things that are going on. It's just how do we put the puzzle pieces together with, I would say, regulators and the states or local counties that want to work with it. So, thank you for that explanation, but it is increasing housing stock density, and many people, like the boomers, are staying in their homes longer. I just heard talk to people, they're staying 11 years versus 7 or 8 years in their homes, and they have a lot of equity. And many of them are doing reverse mortgages and finding ways to cash flow, is to now put an ADU or DADU into your backyard, because usually the boomers have very large lots, right?
Yep.
Their lots back then were much larger, by 30 to 40 or even 50% larger than what the lots are now, right? Some 6,000 square feet right now. Their lots are double normally,
Yep.
but nowadays it's smaller. So it does afford adding density, having them add cash flow. So I just always want to share with the audience, this project and what you're doing is a good case study to think about how you could put it in for your clients, because everyone's looking at how to maximize, and many of them that are boomers are looking not to sell their properties, waiting for a stepped up basis, but try to cash flow what they have, and then whenever they pass away, stepped up, pass it to their kids or grandkids. So, Eddie, thank you. But this is very interesting when you show the numbers. The numbers talk. The story is great, but the numbers do talk.
Absolutely. California allows single family dwellings and multifamily dwellings to add ADUs no matter what type of property you're in, as long as you follow the setback requirements. So again, if we're delivering units at 400, 600 square foot in the prime top markets, whether you go to the bank and refi, or whether think about this as investment later down the line, the ADU also gets captured as effective gross square footage. So there's definitely a good, healthy return to be made, even in the most, basic and simple applications. So that is why I feel like this is a market that is poised, or an industry that's poised to blossom. And again, going back to the commercial application, the returns are even more so amplified, which is why, we want to, once we get this platform up to full speed, and people finally realize the benefits of modular, and it's normally accepted, this case will be the very reason, or one of the many reasons why people can see that. So, talking about this Sunset Hotel and how this deal came about, we actually stumbled across this deal because once I realized quickly how modular can be effective, my goal became to reach out to my entire brokers network to find good deals where this would apply, and really juice returns. And so I underwrote many deals. We have a 30-story building in downtown LA, but that was pre-entitlement. We have 175 key in Roland Heights, which is a suburb of where San Gabriel Valley, where I'm at. And that was actually first done RTI with traditional. And so having to retrofit that, which we're still going through that process, also takes time, right? I quickly found that, if I could get a plan that was not necessarily built for modular, but it was a modular candidate due to, having much more uniformed, rooms, and something that was repeatable. That would be sort of the perfect landmark project to bring the modular product in. And thus, this opportunity came about. It actually happened through the Renaissance Network, through a lot of James's old peers and contacts, as well as, just I guess timing aligned perfectly. We got into escrow on this. And the reason why it was a perfect candidate was number one, it was an opportunity zone. So, I have some 1031 buyers and or investors, and I'm aware of some opportunity funds that are out there that want to get that step up in basis in 10 years. But also, the location was unparalleled. This is located right off of Sunset and Cahuenga, which is a major thoroughfare in the Los Angeles market, sandwiched between, Santa Monica and downtown LA. So you have a lot of people heading towards that direction. Um, and it's very, very centrally located. And we got into escrow and we started to dig deeper. As I started to dig deeper, of course, in working with the Roland Heights project, which was actually planned to be a residence inn by Marriott, I got connected with Aimbridge Hospitality. They are essentially the country's largest management company. They have over 1,500 hotels in their portfolio. And we started to do underwriting and pro formas on what the ideal, I guess, spec would be for this particular hotel. It was initially entitled at 175. We had to kind of dial in, what room count and room size would be the highest revenue generation. So that took quite some time, but we were able to figure that out. And also, in working with a company like that, they're able to source, and because they already have the existing relationships, they're able to tell us which flag is the most ideal for this location, given, the square footage, the entitlements, the build, etc. And so with this Hollywood project, we're not going like on the very top with the JW Marriott lines. We're actually going with Curio by Hilton, which is about a four-star hotel. I actually like that. I find more comfort in that, knowing that I don't have to hit the top of the market to capture revenue. I have a wide sort of demographic and consumer base that can utilize the facilities. And so with Curio, we get sort of that new upscale boutique feel, but without having to break into that ultra luxury market where it's heavily dependent on service. This is something that we can just kind of churn and put to work. Um, Again, Aimbridge oversees over 1,500 properties, and they're actually the leading management company, not just in the US, but in the world. So, if and when we take this project to a REIT or a P firm or a retail buyer, when we're ready to exit, we want to make sure that we have years of operating history that has been managed by a top management company. Just like in the multifamily sector, management is super key, super critical in making sure, you have stable returns and maximized efficiencies. And so that's why we opted to partner with a company like Aimbridge for this. Because where we can save, we can then, utilize all of the best vendors. And then this table here shows the IRR comparison of traditional versus modular, right? And so, with traditional construction on a hotel like this, I know this may be a little bit hard to see, but bear with me here. Traditional construction, hard costs, how we underwrote this and how when we reached out to various GCs and builders, would have been closer to $600 a square foot all in on a 120,000 square foot build, which is what this hotel is. It's 13 stories, will be the tallest modular project in all of California. Traditionally, it would have costed us 600, but with the hybrid build that we're going with, um, and you can skip the middle here because that's just to illustrate pre-tariff versus post-tariff. Let's go ahead and jump to this third column here. With the hybrid build that we're opting to do, where, for the rooms, because we can replicate this and repeat this, the rooms we've decided to go with the modular build. We can then take a hybrid approach where the traditional part of the property, which is, of course, the podium, the parking, etc., and the rooftop, will be built as standard, $600 a square foot. However, the modular, the rooms take up 55,000 square feet of the entire build. We can then use modular here. It's the perfect application. That's about half our building. And we're able to get that done at 250 a square foot, right? Or 245 and some change. This creates a delta of over 15 to 20 million dollars in savings. And that's huge when it comes to IRR. It turns our IRR for something in that 10% range levered to closer to 20% unlevered, 20% levered. Now, unlevered, it goes from about 6 to 8% to closer to 12%. But nonetheless, a 4 to 500 basis point increase on IRR with a lot more accurate and cost certainty. I mean, when I saw that for the first time, I was like, holy crap, this is going to be disruptive because as it stands, very, very little deals pencil out, as you can see, due to the perfect storm that we had mentioned. And if we're able to change a deal from not penciling out to penciling out, imagine how many times we can repeat and how many developers and or investors can utilize this process once they realize the difference that going with, hybrid modular takes or does to a project. So um, we want to use this as sort of the landmark commercial application to be able to illustrate that. And I have a lot of materials on this that I can send to you as well. Not in slide form, but in handout form. But yeah, so again, this is really where the cost savings and efficiencies come into play. It just amplifies returns all across the board.
So
So
Eddie, I know, can you share the process of obviously balancing with the numbers, right? How you put this all together with Aimbridge, with the construction. And the great thing is you do have the secret sauce because of the large manufacturing company wanting to be in the US. And there's a window. I always say until they stabilize it, they do get into the US because
right.
construction development, everyone knows it's variable. Usually you don't go under cost, you go over cost, right? Everyone usually knows that in construction. But with this, because of the predictability and the size of this company, this is a pretty good secret sauce of adjusting numbers where you have more control in the development. But also, can you talk about, how you derived with the F&B and other, let's say, verticals of income and amenities to get Curio?
Sure, yeah. That required a lot of back and forth conversation with Aimbridge at the very beginning in our infancy, and I can share some of these documents that I have. Let me see here. I have, apologies. We've had to go back and forth on this pro forma many, many, many times, but I wanted to show everybody here the submittal package. Uh, Apologies.
And why, like I said, this is a case study. I wanted everyone to know the complexity of you show the presentation, which could be done in 30 minutes, but the amount of hours and work, Eddie, you and the team, and in China, that they have a whole development, design, engineering department put in, right? So the verticals that you had to work in simultaneously. I mean, I've just watched you at a superficial level where you and the team were going very, very granular to each point. So it is good to share people of what need to do to get this large. And I always encourage people to reach out to you, Eddie, and if you could put your contact information in, because it is so important to have an expert, somebody that has gone through this and is building and scaling. But also, I would tell people out there the secret sauce of the connections and relationships you have. If you do have land, if you do think you have a site, reach out to Eddie to take a look because they are going to go larger, bigger in the US. And this is just, step one or step two with a couple projects in Southern California before they start really going countrywide through the US. And they're obviously already going global.
Correct. They've already gone global, heavily in the Australia and European markets, but we would be there's two products going in tandem right now in California. So we're like 1B and 1A essentially, or 1A and 1B. But once we bought into the modular business, it became an arms race to find the perfect project for them to sort of latch onto, to sponsor, support, and back, right? And thus this project came about. But before we even got to this project, I needed to make sure pricing was intact. So I immediately hired a modular expert to our team, one that has in fact been in the business for over 25 years. Prior to modular, what I know of it today, at least, I thought that modular was, using shipping containers, which I've been familiar with and which was industrialized for a while. You saw shipping containers being applied to hotels and self-storage facilities and things like that. He completely debunked me on the changes in modular. And so once I brought him on board with the team, I knew exactly where our costs needed to be disruptive. Because other modular companies can approach, clients, and at the end of the day, the cost savings really are not there. It's just more of a speed efficacy. However, I was determined to find not only, the speed, I mean, the speed is apparent, but to use the theory of, well, hey, if labor costs and materials are cheaper overseas, why not we look over there? And I have already been going to Asia, as James knows, literally every single month for the last 3, 4 years, forging relationships. Let me dig into my network and see if I can find uh building materials and building materials parlayed into getting me in the door with, you know, one of the largest, if not the largest, global construction company in Asia. My buddy happens to be very, very good friends with the president of the company, and when I saw their numbers and I went to their office, one of their many office buildings in Shenzhen, I was like, holy crap! They do over 300 billion in revenue, so this is just a drop in the bucket for us. And so again, it shows that their capacity is virtually unlimited, and that we have essentially a full floor of a modular team dedicated to helping us get this passed. So um, now, what I've then built as a result of that is having a full-blown architecture and engineering team that literally, whenever I have questions, I'll send it to them. And unfortunately, people in Asia, they work like 12 hours a day at a fraction of what it is in the US, but that's a benefit for us. They work very hard and they're able to give us renderings and comments and risk analysis virtually overnight, and I'll show you an example of that. And so being able to have that is awesome for us. But also what I've been able to do in those back and forth conversations and meetings with them was I was able to dial in a price that we couldn't refuse, right? And then same thing here. Like my modular expert brought forth 25 years of modular experience. So, in the event, God forbid, there's acts of God or things break out or I can't use China, I also have a contingency plan with one of the largest modular assembly facilities here in the US where instead of doing the whole modular, I can, do sort of a hybrid half US, half Asia. But point of the story is there's a lot of relationships being built every single day with suppliers and vendors to ensure that this pricing is intact. And I'm trying to get in early with that and have gone in early. But um, addressing the other things, the other verticals that we had to accomplish before we got to this point as well was the logistics side of things. And again, kind of got lucky here, but my family has been doing logistics for about 30 years. So I know what things will cost from air freight and also from sea. And so I fortunately have been able to tap into those relationships. And of course, with all of our deals, that's a pass-through cost for me. And, family and the extension of that, they're not there to make money. They're just here to help us build a relationship business. So I've been able to figure out, the tariff situation, how it costs logistically, how they are going to be essentially delivered because this is oversized freight, and how to coordinate that entire process from the factory over to the US and every step of the way. But I won't get too far into that because that's a whole nother wormhole in itself. And then so once I had the supplier dialed in and the logistics solidified with the cost in mind or a cost on paper, then it became finding the projects, right? And so this is how this project came about. And the reason why it was so perfect is because not only because of the location, which you can see on aerial here, it's literally right across the street from the CNN tower. And on the roof, we're going to be building a rooftop bar that's 360 views. You can see the Hollywood sign from there. Um, but it is a perfect application for modular because the factory told me that anything that is over 7 stories and anything that's over 120 units, that is where the cost savings happen the most. It's the perfect scenario. Like you can really see a strong return if it hits that criteria, at least for their commercial side factory. So that's why this project kind of came about. It just happened to be one of James's old agents. And so we've been kind of going back and forth, and we got into escrow at a really favorable pricing. Because the reality is, this property was on the market for a couple months with another agent and they couldn't sell it. And of course, they were priced ridiculously high. But deals just don't pencil like they used to, with rising costs in both materials and a scarcity of labor and increase in labor costs. But with modular, this deal becomes a home run. So uh, we were able to get into escrow and now we're just figuring out, the nuances to get this thing closed. But in our underwriting, pro journey. These are all things that had to happen in order for me to put them on a matrix and, cost it out. In addition to talking with Ambridge and going back and forth and, leveraging their 1500 plus hotel operating experience where, you know, initially this place was this hotel was a 175 key build, but when I was looking at this in granular detail, some of these rooms are like 100 and something square feet. They're tiny. And so immediately we thought, hey, if we were to increase, the room sizes and reduce the rooms, does that make it a lot more efficient from an operation standpoint because you have less labor required and less units to fill? And because of it being in Hollywood, does the higher price per night support? And I guess our instincts were correct. Ambridge came back and said, actually, you know what? You guys are right. This is a more efficient build to make the rooms a little bit bigger and cater to the demographics that Hollywood supports, right? And then there's things like the rooftop deck didn't have a pool. Well, we quickly found out where if you're in the heart of Hollywood and you have unparalleled views, why would you not do something like a rooftop pool or an infinity pool or things of that nature? We're already saving so much on the rooms. We have the cushion and the buffer to add some amenities like that. And they're like, you know what, you're kind of spot on again because by adding a pool like that to showcase and make this an attraction and destination, you're actually increasing your average daily rate by 10, $15. And 10, $15 times 130 keys, times 70, 80% occupancy, that's a lot of revenue uncaptured. So we decided to adopt that. And then finally, we quickly realized that, this initial build called for 3 stories of parking, but because, and we're confirming this with our architect, but theoretically speaking, if we were to reduce our key count from 170 to 130 or 150, somewhere in that in between point, could we reduce parking? And, on paper, the answer is yes. Of course, we have to resubmit and confirm, but by reducing parking, our cost savings there because of all the concrete that's required and the engineering that's required to handle an additional story, that could reduce our total build cost by 5 or 6 million bucks without affecting our bottom line. And so, these are little things that we've kind of had to chop away and figure out, but we were able to discover that through due diligence. Um, but
And
yeah,
that's why
here,
you need a faster team because time is money. The faster and better you get at this, right? And the right questions, you're going to make less and less mistakes and everything. But what before we end, Eddie,
yeah.
can you share the capital stack? Because obviously money talks. How do you look at putting the money together and all the pieces of what you're expecting and obviously adding maybe the OZ component? Because I did talk to some Microsoft and Apple guys about, their stock options and possibly looking at this project too now.
Yeah. So typically in a syndication, we look at 80-20 splits between sponsor and the capital partner. Whether or not we incorporate a preferred return, I guess, remains to be negotiable. It kind of depends on the group that comes to the table. Are they just a capital partner? Or are they a strategic partner? And how quickly the capital is delivered. But generally speaking, it is a 80-20 split on the cash flow and the upside. Pretty straightforward deal. Um, the sponsors portion is due to the fact that there's been a ton of underwriting, and of course, the relationships are being brought to the table to justify that portion. But with the cash flow IRR in the double digits, to be able to do a split like that should support with the groups that we're speaking with. And be given the size, oh, apologies, phone's blowing up. Given the size of this deal, I mean, it's not really suitable for a sort of a mom paw investor. The total raise is closer to 55, 60 million. But with all that being said, with the right group, we're willing to have a conversation on pref equity and just equity splits in general. But we're in terms of timing, we're looking to close this out on the land level within the next 30 to 45 days. And then on the funding side for construction by the end of the quarter. So, yeah, that's kind of where we're at.
And it's exciting, Eddie, once the land, you have the secret sauce with the construction development, the modular company and their resources, and putting the other monies together, just is normal. But once the project gets more fulfilled, it gets easier and easier. But I know, congratulations, Eddie, on this. Please put your information in, join Top Agent Nation Backstage Pass so you can get more information. We'll have this, if you mind, Eddie, this slideshow in the back so people can look at it, reach out to you if they have any questions. But I would say reach out to Eddie. He's done a lot of due diligence. I know we've been on talks with so many modular companies in the States, outside the States, just talk, talk, talk. And there's always you could always learn from what Eddie and the team, right? The mistakes and learning process and where to go, what to do, the right questions to really speed up your time. And if you're just doing it on a simple ADU or DADU, we are going to start expanding that also in certain markets that very popular, right, Eddie? Because not only are you using this project, but you're going to start distributing and helping market this company within the US. And I know with the competitive advantage and the opportunity right now, it is now, right, Eddie? It is now to start getting people to reach out to you because there is a window of opportunity. And I know Scott Cook from San Diego. Scott, you're there, and James Davis and Max, right? This does work. And if you can have political connections or relationships, like we're going to talk to the mayor and other people within LA, in addition to government and governor, it's going to be interesting, to see where this goes. But Eddie, congratulations. Any final word for everyone? And thank you for putting your information in.
Yeah, final words is that, as you can see, I've now kind of pivoted from commercial broker to full-blown developer because I believe in what modular can do for, not only our clientele, but also for our partners. And, I'm an open book. If anyone wants to learn more about this, and hopefully are as excited as I am, I'm willing to share with you a lot of the discoveries that we found along the way. I look at us, there's a lot of money to be made out there. Let's achieve and let's try to do this together. So, if there's a deal that makes sense or you guys have questions, happy to facilitate. Yeah.
Thank you, Eddie, and thank you everyone for joining us at Top Agent Nation Commercial Wednesdays. Lots of good stuff. I would say reach out, like AI, like social media. This is one of the futures. We will start talking about tokenizations, I would say stable coins and all the other stuff as all this innovation. As Eddie, you said, it's not just being a broker anymore, it's getting the knowledge so you could adjust and be in front of the future of many changes that is definitely happening in the real estate industry, especially commercial development. It's very archaic, as you know, going through this process. So very excited. So please join us every week on Wednesdays to learn more. But everyone have a great day. And Eddie, thank you so much for being our guest today.
Thanks, James. Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
James.
Have a great
Bye-bye.
day, you guys.